The University of Hawaii has been graced in the past with forms of entertainment like slam poetry. Recently, I sat down with slam poet Kealoha to discuss poetry in the university, how it's presented, and where the trend is going. So, my first question, the students at the University of Hawaii would like to know how to get involved with slam poetry. What are the resources that they have available?
For students at the UH, the best resource is probably going to check out a slam poetry show. There's numbers of slam poetry shows on the island. The one that I host is called Hawaii Slam's First Thursdays. Happens once a month on the first Thursday of the month, and it's the largest poetry slam in the world. So you can definitely get involved there. There's a lot of energy and a lot of positive vibes, you know?
Usually, more than 600 people show up to this event. All ages are welcome to see and hear the voices of Hawaiian poetry. Kealoha MCs the event. He will also be an MC and performer for the upcoming Nahoku o Hawaii Festival, which will present the Nahoku Hanohano Music Awards, the Hawaiian version of the Grammys. This is not your first profession. You graduated with...
I graduated from MIT in nuclear physics and engineering. I minored in writing though, so that was like my kind of side thing.
And were you ever a poet in high school or before you decided to major in nuclear physics?
Yeah, you know, I was actually into poetry in high school, and even in elementary school, just kind of, you know, I was into hip hop and like writing little raps. When I got into high school, Lois Ann Yamanaka came to my school, and she totally just freaked my brain out and got me stoked on local poetry. But then when I went off to college, I mean, so I had that brief exposure. When I went off to college, I just stopped writing altogether because I was focused so much on math and science.
Do you ever put that kind of stuff in your poetry, like any influences from that?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I feel like in every piece that I write, there's influences of my science background showing. In engineering, we're taught to break down problems, right? To analyze them, to take a large problem and break it down to small component parts, solve each problem, and then wrap it up into the larger whole. And I tend to do that a lot in my poetry. So it's kind of a natural, logical progression of thought that my pieces follow.
If you had to make a how-to list on how to put on a slam poetry fest, what would you put on the list?
If I had to make a how-to list of how to put on a poetry festival,
like the basic necessities.
Well, number one, you've got to get the word out to the poets and make sure that you've got a good show that's going to come in, you know, into play. Number two, you've got to bring the audience. So that means flyering everywhere, postering, internet, sending press releases, doing all the different things that you need to do to get the word out to the general public. And then three, you've got to deal with all the logistics, the sound, the stage, the theater, like all that, wherever you're throwing the thing, you've got to like handle that, you know. And then four, you just got to be ready for anything that anything else that comes up that needs attention. It's a pretty intense process.
What are the sorts of things that you need to do to combine a slam poetry fest and a music festival? Like, how do they coalesce?
Oh, I feel like they're kind of a natural fit for each other because slam poetry is so musical in essence. You know, I mean, we tend to write with a lot of rhythm in our pieces, so that lends itself to collaborating with musicians really easily. Musicians, on the other hand, are really into writing lyrics, right? And they're really like into the words. So I mean, when you put the two together, there's usually a pretty cool marriage, you know.
You mentioned that with slam poetry, a lot of it is with the lyricism and how you present yourself. Do you see slam poetry more of an art of performance than the actual words behind the poem?
I see it as a 50-50 balance. First and foremost, the words absolutely matter. I mean, your message, the message that you're trying to convey is everything. But at the same time, you have to be able to perform it because if you can't perform it well, no one's going to hear your words, right? So the two are, I mean, to me, they're equally as important, and both need to be focused on as much as possible.
Do you see slam poetry as a trend that will continue, or is something that's, just...
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. You never know what's going to happen. I mean, technically, I would consider slam poets as, I mean, slam poetry is, sure, it's an art form in itself, but yeah, we draw heavily from the beat poets. We draw heavily from all the oral traditions of the world throughout space and time. I mean, this goes as far back as, Homer and the Iliad and Shakespeare and ancient Polynesians chanting. I mean, the griots, people sitting around fires and just talking and telling stories. This tradition has been going on forever, and really this slam poetry movement is just another iteration of the same concept, which is to communicate stories, histories, lessons, commentary, all that.
I think that sometime in the future, the format of its presentation will change.
I would expect it to. I would expect things to continually evolve. I mean, and art forms are, you look at visual art, right? Visual art has been changing throughout the centuries. And theater and dance, I just don't see how poetry could stay stagnant in the same style. It would totally evolve with time. And who knows when that's going to happen. Have
you thought about how it will change? Like will things be presented in a computer, or? I do hypothesize about how things are going to change. You start to see trends, and then you see those trends die out, and then new trends come into play. So right now, the trend is a little bit more, it's a little bit more hip-hop influenced, right? And I see it moving towards definitely incorporating more heavily with music. I think that that's like a huge frontier that hasn't really been explored as thoroughly as it could possibly be. So I see that totally happening, and it's already happening. It's like you can see the beginnings of it going down. What about in Hawaii? What's different about Hawaiian slam poetry?
We have such a unique voice out here. I mean, we're the most isolated island chain in the world. So we've definitely developed our own style of cadence, as well as like the issues that we tackle and the things that we talk about. I mean, it's totally specific to these islands. At the same time, you do see parallels with other cultures. Say, for example, like when we've got sovereignty issues over here, you've got the Native American tribes and what they're going through, up there. And we oftentimes see a lot of bridges being formed through our poetry.
And one last thing, if you're willing to, would you like to present like your favorite poem of the month, or?
My favorite poem of the month?
Yeah.
Sure. Native intelligence spans beyond the confines of generations. Through the teachers that taught us and those that taught them, we stand on the shoulders of giants and can therefore see new horizons. This is the Hawaiian tradition. From the Kumulipo to the Ololo no e Owai, heed the wisdom from my ancestors and listen to ancient chants passed on to the winds of the Ko'olau, and dance to the power that beats of the Ipu I, dance to the power that beats of the Pahu I, dance to the power that beats of Nakapuna. Their voices weave in and out like Lauhala, transcending space and time, finding new homes in the minds of my generation. The modern day Hawaiian, set forth on a course to perpetuate righteousness, to carry on our culture equipped with guitar strings, ukuleles, bass drums, djembes, congas, breakbeats, microphones, turntables, and amplifiers. Let our voices be heard. We are the children, now Pua o Hawaii, the humble link between our kupuna and eternity. We sing new songs with new traditions while maintaining our roots to the past, because the blood coursing through these veins remains the same as that of our ancestors. We practice peace, love, unity, and respect, Just as they taught of Pono, Aloha, Lokahi, and Ho'ihi, we are the 21st century Hawaiian. Stand strong on the shoulders of our past and look to the future with revolutionary eyes. Unite with purpose. We are Hawaiians. Set forth on a course to perpetuate righteousness. We are Hawaiians. Set forth on a course to carry on our culture. We are Hawaiians. Set forth on a course in the 21st century. We are Hawaiians of the 21st century. We are Hawaiians.